Support for Headline Humboldt is made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Coming up next on Headline Humboldt, Keat and the League of Women Voters hosted candidate forums this week for the upcoming Eureka City Council election. We'll hear the candidates' top priorities. Also, we sit down with Fisheries Director Barry McCovey from the Yurok tribe to talk about the now removed dams on the Klamath River and what it means to the tribe, the fish, and the environment for it now to be a free-flowing river. Coming up next on Headline Humboldt. From the top of Humboldt Hill, this is Headline Humboldt. I'm James Falk. Thanks for joining us. It's a rare thing these days to witness a group of indigenous people taking on powerful corporate and governmental interests and ultimately emerging victorious. Then again, maybe it's something we'll start to see more often. Over the last 20 years on the North Coast, we've all been witness to an environmental crime that ended up killing tens of thousands of salmon in the Klamath River watershed and severely hindering the historic and cultural practices of the Yurok and other tribes. In 2002, after decades of restricted flows and bad management, the river had had enough. Fish by the tens of thousands died in the river, raising a horrific stench and finally alerting the wider world to the degraded condition of a once mighty waterway. This cataclysm set off a years-long struggle by the Yurok tribe and its allies to see dams removed and get the river thriving again. Just recently, the last of the dams was finally removed, and while the restoration work is far from over, it represents significant progress in an effort that is likely to take several lifetimes. We'll speak with Yurok Tribal Fisheries Director Barry McCovey to discuss that struggle, its history, and what it means for the people to have that process of healing underway. But first, the news. Keat TV and the League of Women Voters this past week hosted 2 candidate forums to help you, the voters, decide who was right to serve in elected office. On Tuesday, we heard from the Eureka City Council candidates for the 2nd and 4th wards. Ward 2 candidates were challenger Kenny Carswell and incumbent Katie Moulton, while Ward 4's candidates were Scott Bauer, the incumbent, and challenger Thavisak Lucky Sifanthong. Off the top, each city council candidate was asked what their priorities would be if elected. Here's their responses.
I've been doing a lot of door knocking in the area of Ward 2, speaking to my neighbors, and one thing that I think is huge is making sure that their voices are heard. There's a lot of people in that part of town that are feeling that they're not represented by the current city council, so that would be my first goal. Second goal, and this is huge, not just in Eureka, but across the nation, is to face our housing problem. I want to work with local housing groups. I do want to come up with collaborative ideas, especially listening to the voices of Ward 2 and Eureka as a whole. Third, I feel that our local law enforcement and our firefighters are understaffed. They're having issues with recruitment and retention. We need to be on par with similar departments and agencies of their size with other cities.
My priorities would be, I've also been knocking on doors in the ward, talking to people, and everybody wants to talk about housing. Housing is far too expensive. I have families living 2 and 3 families to a house, not because they can't afford a home, but because they can't find one. We need more affordable housing in town. Eureka is also leading the state on creative solutions to homelessness, and I know there's a very visible problem. I run a business in Old Town, and I totally see when there's folks down there who are hard to house, that the problem seems really big. But Eureka is attacking this from a variety of directions, and I would definitely want to keep doing that, keep finding innovative solutions to homelessness, as well as growing our economy from the ground up. We've got new industries coming in, and I want to see those industries bring good jobs for local people.
Housing is critical for so many of our residents, and it relates to all these other issues that we have, and all cities in the nation really have. But I really want to see some housing built. I'd like to also see us really go after transportation. People are struggling. Our roads are in bad shape. We had decades of not doing enough maintenance. Multimodal transportation. We need to share the road with bikes, with pedestrians. So I want to see us continue down the path that we're already doing with our roads. Public safety, we got to maintain public safety. It's critical. People, when I'm knocking on doors, that's a constant issue for them. Mental health and homelessness, we have our programs, we have CARE, we have CSET, we have Uplift. So we're working on those issues, but we got to maintain it. We got to expand those if we really want to see some positive change in our city. And lastly, city budget, robust city budget. Thank you.
I have done a lot of door knocking and have met with the Bridge District at their neighborhood watch meetings. And their concerns are the homelessness in the area causing problems, drug abuse, and all of that. We need to put safety as a priority for our neighbors and our local businesses downtown. Safety is the #1 issue for me because I have a family, also a family of 4 kids, and I grew up here. Another concern is also to fund our police and fire departments. That's part of safety. And another goal is to keep our children with recreation, keep them busy, sports and everything like that, and our local economy, to grow our local economy for our small businesses in the area.
To catch the rest of the City Council forum and to hear from the candidates for State Assembly, visit keat.org or our YouTube channel. 3rd District Supervisor Mike Wilson, also a member of the California Coastal Commission, was singled out by none other than Elon Musk this week and accused of polluting the Commission's regulatory function with politics. Musk on X posted a picture of Wilson along with a link to a video clip. Quote, "The Coastal Commission has one job, take care of the California coast," Musk wrote on X. "It is illegal for them to make decisions based on what they mostly wrongly think are my politics. For example, I have done more to advance sustainable energy and help the environment than maybe anyone ever, which is not exactly a far-right position. Yet here they are shamelessly breaking the law. They should resign immediately and face the appropriate legal consequences for their actions," Musk said. The Commission last week voted to reject SpaceX's plans to increase its rocket launches up to 50 per year from the Vandenberg Space Force Base in Santa Barbara County. Musk believes the decision was a result of bias and has filed suit. He pointed to Wilson's comments at the hearing as proof of that bias, even though Wilson ultimately voted to approve his change. Discussion at the hearing did include a lot of talk around Musk's political views. Musk's plan was rejected by a 6-4 vote. Hat tip to the Lost Coast Outpost for first reporting this story. We'll be right back with Barry McCovey after this short break.
Get ready to bid on your dream vacation. Our exclusive travel auction is coming and registration is opening now. Bidding begins November 17th and ends on the 23rd. But don't wait, secure your spot today. Exotic escapes, thrilling adventures, and unbelievable memories are just a bit away. Share the excitement with your friends and mark your calendars. Everyone's invited to join on this adventure, so tell your friends, register now.
Who's gonna tell you things aren't so...
As our world has advanced, so have our modes of transportation, but our favorite vehicles eventually have to go somewhere.
You can't go wrong.
By donating your used car, truck, motorcycle, or RV to your local PBS station, you can make room to upgrade your wheels. Don't wait. Go online and make your donation now.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Joining us now in studio is Barry McCovey. He is the Yurok Tribal Fisheries Department Director. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So it's hard to accurately describe, I think, the scope of this overall story. I mean, we've all kind of borne witness to the last 20 years after the 2002 fish kill, which I remember as a reporter seeing pictures and hearing the stories, and it was horrific. You were living it. You were within the Fisheries Department at the time, I think. But I wanted to start sort of with a sort of a smaller frame, the personal story or the human story about it. I mean, you were raised in the region, and you probably have a lot of personal memories of the river from childhood. Can you share some of that with us, or what the river represented to you as a young pup coming up?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me, James. So I grew up on the Yurok Reservation on the Klamath River. It's where I spent a lot of my free time, was on the river. My dad taught me how to fish, and so fishing was a big part of our identity as Yurok people. And a part of my personal identity. We did a lot of fishing and just spent a lot of time at the river, so kind of developed that relationship from a very young age a really close relationship where I was there as often as I could. And growing up, I didn't know that we could do something to help the river because the fisheries department for the Yurok tribe didn't exist then. But as I got older, the tribe got developed and organized and started a fisheries department. And in my young adulthood, I recognized that was something that you could do. That was an option, was to spend your days on the river, helping the river, and that was amazing. I couldn't believe that was an option at the time, and so I chose that as a career, and I've been doing it ever since, working to help preserve and restore the river. What I saw over that time was this kind of gradual decline in the fishery, and then a more punctuated decline around 2014, 2015, when we kind of really got into this cycle of drought. And by then, I'm a professional, I'm a fisheries biologist working on the river, so I'm seeing all this firsthand from a fisherman and a tribal member perspective, but also from a scientific perspective. And, the 2002 fish kill definitely galvanized the community, and that was when we recognized that this something really needed to change. Yeah. But over time, things slowly got worse and worse, and to the point where, the Yurok tribe has had a hard time having a subsistence fishery the past few years. And so we're doing all we can, and dam removal is a really big part of that.
Yeah. Now, there was a lot of interests at play at first, but eventually there was this agreement that was negotiated where the dams would be removed. Can you talk a little bit about what that process was, and then also the role that the tribe played in sort of herding those cats toward getting a solution operable? So
there's been a number of iterations of an agreement to get these dams removed. It's been a bit of a roller coaster ride over the past 20 years or so, where we'll get right almost to the finish line and then something will happen and we'll get knocked back down again. The tribe has really been instrumental in keeping the train on the tracks, really pushing and keeping the pressure on to get this project across the finish line. Like I mentioned, the deal to get these dams removed has fallen apart and been put back together a number of times. The tribe has been in the middle of all that, but there's been so many others who have been there with us along the way. The other tribes, NGOs, our partners in the state government and federal government, the fishermen, commercial fishermen associations. So it's been this big group effort, and I've never seen a community or communities of people so galvanized with one goal in mind in my professional career. Yeah. Before the show we were talking, and you said this is probably or may well be the biggest restoration project in history. This is no small thing that we're seeing happen here, and we're in a nation that's largely been plagued by the sort of knee-jerk placement of dams along rivers. Yeah. And so do you think that this could eventually play as a model for other folks in other regions to sort of navigate this process, or did it happen here because it's kind of a unique situation? I think a little bit of both. There was definitely a unique situation here that was at play with the tribes, and the tribes pushing really hard, and there's a chance on the Klamath. Everyone believes that there's a chance to restore this ecosystem and restore balance to here. Yeah. But on the other hand, we do hope that this serves as a model. There are many, many rivers that are needlessly dammed. The Snake River in Idaho, the Eel River here in our region. Yeah. We're looking forward to those dam removals hopefully in the near future. We're hoping that people working on those can look to the Klamath. The Klamath dam removal was very complex. There's so many different people at play, so many different regions, states, federal government, and it took a long time to get that across the finish line. Hopefully with these other dam removals, they can learn from us, see what we had to go through, and their process can be a little easier and hopefully a little faster. Yeah. One of the interesting things that we saw sort of play out with this particular process was that there was almost like a left and right kind of shift back and forth. When we would have a left administration or Democratic administration, there would be progress made, and then sometimes that would fall back when there was a Republican president. And then there was the sort of social division between people on the lower basin and then the farmers in the upper basin, and that was famously talked about as sort of a conflict between regular folks, and that was kind of the political football that got kicked around. How has that
that conflict between the farmers and the lower basin, how has that been resolved, or is it resolved? And where does it stand right now, do you think?
As far as dam removal is concerned, the removal of the dams shouldn't have a large impact on the agricultural community of the upper basin. Those dams never had any agricultural diversions, so the agricultural diversion up there is controlled by the Bureau of Reclamation. So as far as dam removal goes, I don't think there's any animosity there. There shouldn't be, because they're not connected. But as far as water goes in the Klamath Basin, we have a long way to go, and we have a lot of work to do to make sure that everyone is receiving equitable amounts of water in a system that's slowly drying up. With climate change impacting the region and the basin, there's less water to go around. And so we need to be creative and come up with solutions that work for the basin.
Now, so people understand diversions will still be happening from the river, but they just won't be happening through these dams. Is that how it works?
So the diversions never happened through the 4 dams that were removed on the Klamath. They were hydroelectric.
Okay.
There was no agricultural diversions. The agricultural diversion is managed by the Bureau of Reclamation.
Okay.
Yes.
So like levees and that kind of thing?
Yes, there's still 2 small dams on the Klamath that facilitate the agricultural diversion.
But you pretty confident that you can get to full health on the river with those 2 small dams in place, or is that a later project?
Those 2 dams have fish passage. They're small and they have fish passage. They're more like diversion dams, and so we believe that we can get fish past those. There's some work to do regarding water quality that we're going to be working on with our partners and all partnerships with the Klamath tribes and a lot of the local NGOs and folks up in that region. They're going to be doing the heavy lifting. We're there to support them. And making sure that fish are getting through that area and up into Upper Klamath Lake and then the tributaries of Upper Klamath Lake.
There is a lot of restoration work to do. I guess you were saying that you guys are one of the biggest players in that. You've been contracted to help with that, and there's other folks involved. But can you talk a little bit about the work that's ongoing now? I mean, the dams have just been removed, and so there's former reservoir area that needs to be built up, and then the river itself needs restoration work, correct?
So there's a lot of restoration to happen in many, many years, and I think you said lifetimes in the intro, and that's probably true. We're going to be up there working on restoring this part of the river for a long time. So the dams were just removed. The reservoirs were drained in the winter. As soon as the reservoirs were drained, the most important thing to do is to get seeds on the ground and start to revegetate those reservoir footprints to kind of lock that sediment in place. We work with Resource Environmental Solutions. We're under contract with Resource Environmental Solutions. They're tasked with the restoration of those reservoir footprints. They work for the Klamath River Renewal Corporation. So in partnership with those guys, the Yurok tribe worked to help reseed and replant the reservoir footprints last winter. We're doing another round of planting and seeding as we speak, and the idea is to kind of lock all of that sediment in place, keep invasive species from taking over, and get good native grasses and plants and trees planted back into those reservoir footprints, and that's ongoing.
Okay, so those will eventually be like meadows and forest land once the stuff has a chance to reclaim the property, right?
Hopefully in our lifetimes we'll see that meadows and forest land start to come back. Yeah.
And then the river, of course. I asked you earlier, and this is sort of a naive conception, but a lot of us are thinking, they take the dams out, there's going to be a surge of water, and did people have to get away from the river for a little while? I mean, but you talked about the process. Mainly the issue was watching out for sedimentation. And there was some of that seen, but how does it look now, and what are you guys expecting over the next year or two?
The process was in the winter they drained the reservoirs, so basically bored holes through the bottom of the dams, drained the reservoirs, and that created a large amount of sediment. There's been sediment being stored behind those dams for 60 years to 100 years, depending on what reservoir we're talking about. We chose to do that in the winter because the river is naturally high then. You have a lot of inputs from tributary streams, cold, clear water coming in, and so it dilute that sediment, and that's what happened. There was another slug of sediment that was released just recently. It was nowhere near the amount of sediment that was released during the winter, but because of kind of the final remnants of Iron Gate Dam being removed, it released another slug of sediment this fall. We're still dealing with that a bit, but it's getting better and better by the day. I monitor turbidity measurements every day and temperatures, and every day it's getting better and better. We're seeing fish start to make their way through that sediment and up into areas that they haven't been in 60 to 100 years.
That's fantastic.
So there's a lot of exciting things happening right now in the Klamath.
Yeah. Now, we were also talking a little bit about the different populations. There's fishery or hatchery fish, and then there's also going to be some wild salmon that are probably wandering off of other populations and making their way up. Can you talk about that a little bit? And,
Definitely.
And really, I wanted to hopefully explore the difference between hatchery fish and the wild fish. Are they genetically inferior, and will they improve over time now that they're wild? What's that look like? So
there was been a hatchery, it's called a mitigation hatchery. It's there to mitigate the loss of production upstream of Iron Gate Dam. Since 1964, there's been a hatchery there at Iron Gate Dam. That hatchery was moved upstream to Fall Creek, which is up towards the top of the former Iron Gate Reservoir. So that hatchery has been producing fish for about 2 or 3 years now, and they were trucked down and released below Iron Gate Dam. So we expect that this year we'll start to see those fish return to Fall Creek Hatchery and maybe some of the tributaries before you get the Fall Creek Hatchery. But also 5 to 10% of all salmon will stray from their original home. So what salmon do typically is they're born in a creek, a specific creek. They go to the ocean for a few years. So they come back to where they were born. That's kind of a real basic idea of salmon life history.
Poetic archetypal story, salmon going home.
Yeah, but about 5 to 10% of those fish don't return to the spot they were born. They stray and find a new place to spawn. And so we expect that those strays from the more wild population will start to find their way up into this new habitat and start to recolonize also. So we'll get a bit of both. And then as far as we want wild fish to slowly recolonize those areas. That's how you build in that genetic resiliency, and that's the best way to do it. We know that on the Klamath we're going to need help from the hatcheries. That's just part of the deal now. Eventually, we hope we get to a place where we don't need help from the hatcheries, but that's going to be a while. So as far as genetic inferiority, hatchery fish, they tend to start to lose some of the genetic traits that make wild fish more resilient to changes in the environment, diseases, things like that. So that's our main concern with hatchery fish. And again, we know we're going to need them early on, but eventually the hope is that we can wean ourselves off of hatcheries.
Yeah, and as you lower the number of hatchery fish, the genetic pool will get stronger by, sort of direct proportion, right?
Yeah, That's the idea.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Now, fishing on the river, are you guys going to, I know that you guys aren't responsible for that, but what do you view fishing going forward? Should we be fishing commercially or recreationally on the river coming up, or should we wait to relieve that pressure from folks or from the river? What do you think?
Well, I think we'll rely on the Pacific Fisheries Management Council, and the process that's always been in place is they develop a model of harvest and harvestable surplus, a population model each year, and then the different fishing groups, whether it be tribal or state, develop their harvest plans based off of those models. That's what we've always done, and we'll continue to do that. The council is working now on how to incorporate this new data, because there's a whole chunk of new data to start to include into the Klamath modeling, and we're working on that with them. But I think for now it's a wait and see. We look at what are the predictions saying for this year. Does it look like it's going to be a robust run? Because you have to remember there's the Klamath, but there's also the Trinity, and there's also all these other areas where salmon spawn in the Klamath Basin. So we have to take that into account.
And also there's a lag, right? This next year's return won't be necessarily affected by what happened, or because it's like 3 years.
3 to 4 years, So there is a lag there on how populations are impacted.
Yeah. Fascinating. Now, what do you think? Is there a hope that people talk about the legendary status of the Klamath River in particular, that there used to be abundant salmon, and it was almost like you could walk across the river on the backs of salmon, that sort of thing. Are we potentially looking at a sort of return to that idyllic pre-industrialization state where we could have an ideal fishery here that is unmolested by the worst of our inclinations technologically, or is that a pipe dream?
That's the hope.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work to do. We talked earlier about the restoration that needs to happen, and some of the projects that we're involved in. We have to remember that salmon haven't been in this area for 60 to 100 years, and so the tributary streams that they spawned in for millennia may not be hospitable And so there's a lot of work to do there to make them hospitable. We're involved in a lot of that. We're working hard with our partners to make sure that that becomes a reality, so that when those fish return to those areas, they have a home to return to. And then, dam removal is a huge step. Like, we like to say that dam removal was the largest single step that we could take in restoring the Klamath Basin, but it's just a single step. So there's a lot of other issues that we need to tackle when we're talking about ecosystem-wide restoration. Because if we want to restore salmon populations, we have to fix the problem at its source. And there are many sources of problems in the basin. We're trying, the Yurok tribe is, we have our hands in a little bit of everything, trying to work on all aspects of ecosystem restoration. That's our goal. It's going to take some time, but that's why we're here. We're here to take that time to do the work and to do the work right.
Yeah, my viewers would be familiar with the Condor program, restoration program, which we've highlighted on the show before, which is an amazing program. And again, those are two different aspects of the same system. And, but I mean, to be accurate, the salmon fishery is a huge source of the nutritional and like biomass of the whole ecosystem. So this is really a major step toward that restoration, correct?
I mean, salmon are considered a keystone species. So it's a keystone species to the ecosystem for their nutrient input, but also a cultural keystone species, not just to tribal people, but to people at large. Everyone cares about salmon. And so they're extremely important. And just like condor, the idea behind all of this is restoring balance. And that's what motivates the Yurok tribe and a lot of our actions is restoring that balance to the ecosystem. If we can restore the balance, we'll see the reaction from those inhabitants of the ecosystem in a positive direction. And all of us are inhabitants of the ecosystem. So the idea is that we'll see positivity in our lives also. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's going to be an amazing, wonderful thing to behold. And I think we all owe the tribe and your partners a lot of thanks for the hard work that you guys have done to see that work completed. Last question, we've got about a minute left. One question that I had, is there going to be any more reason to fear things like flooding or that kind of thing along the river for the residents who are nearby? Is that going to ultimately be an issue because the dams are gone or not?
The dams were never designed to be flood control mechanisms, so I don't see that being a huge issue. There's been a lot of misinformation out there related to dam removal, and we try to push back against that as best we can, but it's a very polarizing action to take, and I know that people are affected by it negatively. They lost the reservoirs maybe that they cherished, and so we feel for them, and that wasn't the intent to hurt anyone in this process.
I think that we're all ultimately going to benefit from it. So thank you, Barry, for coming on and for joining us on the show and for all the hard work you guys have done.
Thank you.
I think it's a wonderful, wonderful work. That's it for tonight. Remember, if you missed the candidate forums, you can find them on our website or on YouTube. And don't forget to check out my podcast, Neon Galactic, available on most podcast platforms and also on YouTube. Stay tuned, stay informed.